Hello, everyone. This is Lou Carlozo, the editor-in-chief of Quoted, a journalism platform extraordinaire. They say so as the editor. And we have someone with us here that is doing something extraordinary for journalists in the 21st century and right now in the midst of the terrible war going on in Ukraine. That's Jakub Parusinski. He's the current editor at The Fixed Media and a managing partner at J-Nomics Media. He's based in London. Jakub, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me on, Lou.
Now, I want to give a shout out to someone who I think is a very special reporter at an incredibly special publication, Mark Rice Oxley of The Guardian. And he was one of the very first to write about your GoFundMe campaign, which is Keep Ukrainia's Media Going. And we'll have information later on how you can donate to that. One of the things that fascinated me, it's how I learned about your campaign, is why you would do this, and then further, what your background is vis-a-vis journalism in the Ukraine. Maybe you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So my story with journalism and Ukraine goes way back. I first came to Ukraine in 2009. I'm Polish-Australian by background. And I started working. I didn't really know what to do. I came with the person who was to become my future wife, and didn't really know what to do, and decided to why not try and go into journalism. So I ended up, Ukraine is a very special country in many ways, but I think especially so for journalists, because a lot of people come to Ukraine to really get their first experience as foreign correspondents. It's a country which, is always in the news for some reason or other, but is very accessible at the same time. Usually it's not quite as tragic as the situation right now. And so, it's a place where there's a lot of foreign correspondents. I showed up there. I ended up writing for some local publications, some international ones. And then went on to become first the chief editor and then the CEO of the Kyiv Post, which was the premier English language publication in Ukraine up until about 4 months ago, when there was an attempt to take over its or reduce the editorial independence, and it led to the appearance of its spiritual successor, the Kyiv Independent. But I've been involved in Ukrainian media for over a decade now, working with lots of publications via various nonprofits. As a journalist, as an editor, as a media manager, a trainer. So it's a place that I love. It's people that are doing amazing work, and as with everyone, there was a question of what can we do to help them right now. So yeah.
And boy, have you helped them. For those of us that may not be familiar with what the genesis of the GoFundMe campaign was, tell us what moved you to start it and what your aim and objective is and has been from the very start.
Sure. So, to go to the genesis of the GoFundMe for the Ukrainian media, you even have to go a little bit back, because as I mentioned, about 4 months ago now, the Kyiv Independent was launched by a team of journalists from the Kyiv Post, as well as a team of media managers from my consulting company, which focuses more on the business and the management side of things. And, we had launched that as a small startup. We had a GoFundMe to get things going. And so the Kyiv Independent already had this GoFundMe in place, as the war broke out. And the Kyiv Independent became, I think it's fair to say, for the global audiences, one of the main sources of information about what's happening on the ground. And, a lot of people reached out to support us. And so we understood that, while the Kyiv Independent is in a privileged place, having access to these global audiences, there's also all of the other media. that are that will need a lot of support. So, you know, just in the first hours of the war, we decided to also set up a platform that will be helping all the other media. And by the way, the Kyiv Independent has been promoting that quite actively as well, knowing that, you know, it needs to leverage its platform globally to help colleagues in other media. And there's been a tremendous response. It even goes beyond the GoFund Me. You know, Axel Springer came and decided to donate €500,000 to buying equipment and other forms of support to Ukrainian media. There's really been a lot, but then the need is really huge. So far, I think we've sent small sums to cover urgent needs to about 70 or so media. The number is constantly growing, and there's sort of 14 big national media that we're working with to make sure that they have the funds to survive for the next 6 months, because obviously the local market has been completely obliterated. I mean, Ukraine has 10 million displaced persons. There's millions who have already fled the country. It's absolutely devastating.
There is no question about that. Even the recent stories that Ukrainian refugees are being essentially kidnapped and taken to Russia and maybe used as bargaining chips in terms of the war. Now, you mentioned growth of the numbers on the side of media who have been helped. What I find stunning is that I nearly have to check in every day to see where the campaign was. I think when I first wrote about it, it was £30,000. And then as of this morning, it's closing in on £1 million. And I know for those of you listening and watching who think of that in terms of dollars, it's past $1.2 million. Absolutely incredible. Tell us a little bit about over time what this money is going to do, because people may have an abstract sense, oh, it's going to help the media. But we're not just talking about emergent needs. We're also talking about the next several months, because as you and I talked about off camera, even if the war were to end today, there's a lot of rebuilding to do and a lot that needs to happen to help these journalists.
Absolutely. So again, looking a little bit broader than just the GoFundMe, because we have been working with other donors, receiving direct donations from a lot of media, by the way, you know, including people like Bonnier News in Sweden, Gazeta Wyborcza in Poland, and lots of other publishers who have also generously donated to support their colleagues in Ukraine. So looking at the bigger picture, not just the GoFundMe, yes. It's a little bit tricky. So we don't know. It was hard to say sort of how aggressive the Russian advances would be, and to what extent Ukrainian media would need to relocate outside of the country. It looks like for now that need is not quite as great, but definitely part of the money is there for people who have had to go abroad. And supporting them there, because you know Ukraine is it's always more expensive to be a refugee somewhere. You know, to find them working space, to support their living expenses. You know, whether it's in Poland, the Baltics, Czech Republic, or whatever other neighboring countries they may be. So there's a part that's going to that, but increasingly, what we're looking at is, you know. How do we make sure that the media are supplied in terms of equipment? That's something that we're working on very urgent, with great urgency right now, making sure that they have protective gear, but also, you know, lots of things for living, you know, for just general life, right? Like that they're all supplied. And then obviously over the coming months, making sure that they have salaries, that they're able to pay for, you know, their accommodation, for travel, to continue to do work, to continue to report. What you need to understand is a lot of the journalists have been internally displaced. Very few are remaining in hotspots like Kyiv, like Kharkiv, like Mykolaiv in the south. Most of them are in the west of the country, and obviously the living costs in the west of Ukraine, which is relatively safer, have gone through the roof, because all of a sudden the population of that region has just doubled. So we're trying to be flexible, to adapt as we go, but basically to make sure to stretch out those funds to support media over, I would say, the midterm, or even the long term, which for us now is 12 months. That seems incredibly far away. That's sort of how we're thinking about it.
Absolutely. And it's equally impressive to me that as your campaign has expanded, it's about much more than the campaign. You gave us a glimpse into that. What I find talking to many of my colleagues, and this is a common problem, is this idea that, hey, I want to help, but maybe other than giving money to the campaign, which I am going to do, I don't know exactly what to do. Because if you talk about 12 months, that's a long period of time. And I'll just speak for myself. I know I could be doing more than just giving. What are some things that the journalism community in North America, and to those journalists we're connected to across the world, what can we be doing right now?
So first and foremost, it's making sure that Ukraine doesn't fall off of the agenda. I mean, unfortunately, and I think we in the media know this very well, that people's time horizons are short, their attention span is short. They tend to go on to the next big thing pretty quickly, and it's just really important for that not to let that happen. So I think there's just a very big role for the journalism community to make sure to not, let this drop and disappear, and then, in darkness is where bad things happen, right? When people stop talking, when there's silence, that's when then really bad things happen. So I think just keeping it keeping the world's eye on what is happening is really important. I think all of the manifestations, all of the protests going out, this is really important. It's not just for journalists. I would say it's for people overall. Making sure to show the world that people still care about what's happening is extremely important. And then there's a growing number of initiatives now that are looking at how media is going to change. And I would say, I know it's frustrating, but still there's some waiting to just wait and see for the new initiatives for media to get involved in how to help colleagues in Ukraine, for those to appear. I think that's really important as well. So,
yeah, and we should not forget, of course, that there is no living in a silo here, that sometimes the journalists are going to be part of the families that have refugees, and in some cases have lost people to the bombing and the war. So there's really a lot we can be thinking about here when we think about help. One final question that maybe has been missed in other coverage. I know it's of great interest to me. When I talked to a Ukrainian journalist recently, Yuri Mitsarsky, he has talked to me about how they've been able to intercept Russian communications because their strategy has been so inept. They're learning about things on the ground that are going wrong. Further, there are some great journalists in Ukraine who could be doing work to uncover things that Russia has been done, to release or discover documents. So I'm wondering if that is an important part of the picture as well, to keep these journalists going, because they can reveal things about the war and war crimes and Russia's agenda that might otherwise be missed by other journalists from across the world, because they're on the ground there, they know the turf, they know the terrain, and they also have decades, in some cases, maybe a century or more, if you look at the media, of history, where they know what the Russian mentality is in the Kremlin and elsewhere. Do you think they could be playing a role here in exposing some of what's going on to investigative media, et cetera?
I think yes, but you sort of, there's maybe with one note of caution. So I think when so I'm not on the ground now, so it's hard for me to speak to the experience of the journalists there. But I was in Ukraine during Maidan, the revolution in 2013, 2014. And it's, when things are happening with that kind of intensity, and it was pretty intense then, obviously now it's much more serious. It's difficult to sort of be taking a global perspective, and your field of vision is quite restricted, I think. Mm-hmm. So I would say it's more about a combination of efforts, or sort of a pulling together efforts. I think journalists who are on the ground and who are doing reporting on what is happening, they're doing a hugely valuable piece. I think their editors are the ones who need to help them bring in the context and everything and sort of pull together the bigger story. I think for the journalism community globally, there is also a huge opportunity to be helpful when it comes to OSINT work. So things that Bellingcat is doing, or, there's a bunch of people who are doing this now on a quite regular basis around this Russian invasion, which is combing through the pictures, doing geolocation. These are things that you can join in and contribute to the efforts. But I think the journalists on the ground, they have a very specific role. And then the people who are back in the editorial office, they're the ones who sort of put it together, if that makes sense. Not sure that quite answered the question that you had, but...
Yeah, no, it was a more speculative question. And the sense that I get in terms of your answer is that it's a 360-degree view, right? That really what's going on the ground, the intensity of it, the incredible energy and pressure, that is in many senses job one, or it is the most immediate thing. And then there are these other elements where, yes, maybe editors in Ukraine can contribute, but the worldwide press can play a part in that because it is more a geopolitical picture. That's the sense I'm getting from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think there's so many angles to be taking right now in terms of the stories that are coming out of this. And look, one of the things that always amazed me, whenever we were doing a story in Ukraine, like it would end up, you'd start pulling the thread, like in Kiev or in whatever city in Ukraine, and it would end up in Washington, D.C. or in Brussels or in Moscow. There's so much geopolitics involved with this country, which has been a curse, I think, for Ukraine. But take Paul Manafort, right, in the U.S. Everyone in Kiev knew who that was in 2012. We were very aware about this guy and what he's doing. And the stories start in Ukraine, but they always go global. There's just so much geopolitical, so many geopolitical knots to unravel that I think all the journalists who are reporting now, they can find something there and sort of pull the thread back to wherever they are.
Exactly. And this may sound like a political statement. It is not. Readers of my column know that I am about the media and getting to the truth. We have Manafort. We have Zelensky shocked by this phone call from Trump trying to get information on Joe Biden. And we have Donald Trump in the media declaring Putin a genius with this war, which is incredible. I guess you could declare Hitler a genius because there were war crimes there and killing of innocent people. But that is one thing that I know American journalists are looking into, is what might be the connection there, if there is one. And there are many, many threads to pull. Just in summing up, I'm wondering, you have an audience here, a direct line of communication to the people watching this. If there is a parting shot here, a message that you want to get across related to this situation, what you're seeing, what might that be?
Well, I think, maybe taking a slight step back, when you look at what is happening in Ukraine today, and you look at the neighbors in Belarus, in Russia, one of the big things that distinguishes Ukraine, aside from we're sort of very much connected to the spirit of the people from the other two countries, is the existence of a free media. And that's something that Ukrainians have fought for time and time again. And that's something that has allowed the society to grow. It's not without its challenges, but it was, I mean, completely heaven and earth difference between, you know, what's happening in Belarus and Russia. And, you know, that's what happens when you have a free media. That's a key part of having a healthy, you know, democracy, a healthy society. And, you know, I think it's really important that, you know, we are able to support Ukraine to overcome in this challenge, but also to support its media, to not let them die, because they are really the carriers of a legacy that is very unique in this region. And hopefully it can spread further. So yeah, we're continuing to work, you know, coming up with new ideas on how to support the Ukrainian media. There's an, you know, next week, hopefully we'll be announcing plans about trying to get more companies and international organizations involved in actually directly working with Ukrainian media, advertising there, doing you know, sponsorships and things like that, because we need this media sector to keep going. It plays a really big role in the country, in the region, and they're doing God's work right now. So you know, we need to help them keep going.
There is absolutely no question. The quote that I've always loved throughout my career, it was originally applied to the rich, but I think fits in the case of this war. I.F. Stone said, the media's job is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And I can't think of anyone who is more comfortable than the Russian oligarchs and Vladimir Putin, and more afflicted than the Ukrainian people, and to a large degree, the journalists. So I would say right back at you, you're doing God's work. And if all goes well, I look forward to seeing you in London in 2 weeks to get an update on what you're doing. And to everyone watching and listening, the GoFundMe campaign is Keep Ukraine's Media Going. You want to be a part of this, because every time I turn around, they break the fundraising goal and they have to set a new one, which is incredible. And this money is going directly to where it's needed. Jakub, thank you so much for being on, and we'll look forward to catching up very soon.
Thank you so much, Lou. Look, really looking forward to meeting in London as well. And thanks so much for the discussion.
Jakub Parusinski is the editor at The Fix Media, managing partner at J-Nomics Media, and the founder and lead force behind the GoFundMe campaign, Keep Ukrainia's Media Going. Thanks again, Jakub.
Thank you.